Hi everybody, Steven here. So you want to protect your vSphere environment and take advantage of microsegmentation without having to rip up all your VMs and migrate VMs over to different segments and stuff. Well, that's what we're going to talk about in this video, so stick around. Hi everybody, thanks for sticking around. So let's jump right into this thing. So let's say you're a vSphere administrator, you've been mandated to provide higher level of security using stuff like microsegmentation, or let's say you want to protect your vSphere environment with NSX's microsegmentation, the distributed firewall, but you don't need any of that other stuff. I don't need overlay networks, I don't need distributed routing, I don't need gateways, any of that stuff. I got a typical vSphere environment, my routing's in the outside world, I've got regular port groups. Now, one of the things, if you watched my distributed firewall videos, there was actually two of them. One was a lecture theory, and the other one was a demo. I'll leave links for those in the comments, right? If you watch those, in my demo, I actually showed this. The NSX distributed firewall does not, I repeat, does not work with regular port groups. So if you got a distributed port group, a regular standard port group, it doesn't work with those. It only works with NSX segments, whether it's an overlay segment or whether it's a VLAN back segment. So what did we do? Well, VMware would basically go out to a customer and they say, yeah, I want to take advantage of microsegmentation. I don't need anything else. I don't need any of the other stuff. Sounds pretty cool, but I don't need it. I just want the security aspects, right? So that's where what we would do is we would tell the customer, okay, deploy NSX, set up the NSX manager. You would create a VLAN back transport zone. And then from there, you would create VLAN back segments, all right? Now, those VLAN back segments are NSX segments, so they can be protected by the distributed firewall. Sounds pretty good. Problem here is, then you told the vSphere administrator, you need to migrate all your VMs from the regular port groups and put them on the NSX VLAN back segments. So that was obviously met with some resistance, right? That's extra work, didn't really make sense. So along came, and I'm pretty sure it was NSX 3.2. Don't quote me on the version. I don't care. I think it was NSX 3.2. It might have been 3.1. Pretty sure it was 3.2. Gave us the capabilities of now deploying NSX and utilizing and having our VM still utilize standard switches, right? Sorry, regular port groups, I should have said, right? So on your distributed switch. So one of the nice features was, and this came out in vSphere 7.0 update 3, you're able to, let's say you're a vSphere administrator, you don't know anything about NSX, you know how to deploy appliances, maybe you're taking an NSX security class or a 5-day security class on intrinsic security, and that's about it. You don't care about any of the other stuff, right? You just want to get in and start playing with the firewall. So you can now deploy NSX within your vSphere environment. So let me show you that. Let me get this. There we go. So I've got my environment here ready to go. Let me just show you it. Here's my lab environment. I'll click on hosts and clusters. Just ignore the edge cluster. I don't care about it. I've got site A cluster 01. I've got host 1, 2, and 3. This is a vSAN cluster. I've got some VMs over here. There's no NSX on this whatsoever. There's nothing. If I go to my networking, you'll see it's using the distributed switch, VDS01. I've got some port groups for app, database. If I click on app and I look at number of VMs, you'll see there's an app VM using it. Database port group is a database VM. I got a port group called web using the web VM. So these are just regular port groups on my distributed switch, so no NSX stuff here. And I got some port groups for management and vMotion and vSAN. Who cares? So I now want to deploy NSX. So I can go under here, I can go to here. Down at the bottom, towards the bottom, you see NSX. And I click on that. Now it says, hey, it looks like you're not configured with NSX as of yet. Do you want to install it? I'm going to say sure. So this is kind of new. It's not really kind of new, but it is new-ish. So it allows your vSphere administrator with basic knowledge of NSX to set this up. So I'm going to click on install. It's looking for my OVF files. I'm going to basically have the 4.1 appliance I'm deploying. I'll say open. I'll go next. Then it's asking me what location do I want to put it in. I'll put it in my Site A data center. It's asking me what cluster. I'm putting it in my Site A cluster. Ignore the edge one. I probably should have just deleted it for the demo, but I'm going to click next. And then it's checking the compatibilities. My lab environment is a nested environment. It means I got VMs running on top of VMs. That's what a nested environment is. So officially it's not supported, but it works. Now notice it comes up and gives you some warnings here, right? It says the certificate is self-signed. Now in your environment, that might be a problem, right? You may have mandates saying, no, we can't use self-signed certificates. I'm going to ignore it in my lab. The self-signed certificate is also not trusted. So again, you probably have mandates in your environment where you have to use trusted certificates. Again, I don't care. Now over here, it's basically saying the OVF package requires access to vCenter server. This deployment will provide vCenter server login credentials to the new appliance. Please confirm this appliance is trusted before proceeding. So it's basically telling me you're going to provide this appliance with authentication information. Do you trust this appliance? Did you get it on the black market or something like that? So I'm going to say, no, I trust this appliance. Okay, so I'm going to click on continue. Now, for the size, this depends on the number of rollouts. I talked about this on my deployment class for NSX Manager, but small here is for proof of concept environments. Medium size is for up to 128 transport nodes. So let's say 128 hosts, and then large is for anything larger than that. I'm just going to pick small for proof of concept. We'll go next. Extra small, by the way, is for like a cloud environment. Now it's asking me, this is a VM we're deploying here. It's an appliance, so it says, what data store do I want to put it on? I got my vSAN data store. I'm just going to pick that. Great. I'll go next. Now it's asking me what port group. So this appliance, this is the NSX Manager appliance, has an interface, a network interface. So this has to be on your management network. So I'm just going to browse, and I'm going to go to my distributed port group management. That's where I got everything. That's my management network. Your network might be different. I'll click next. Now it's telling me I got a bunch of properties I have to configure. So the grub root password, the default one here is VMware. I would suggest you change it. Again, if you're in production, I don't care, my lab environment. Grub is like a bootloader. So I could actually log into Grub, and if I have to recover root passwords and stuff. Now it's asking me for my root user password for NSX. So I'm going to type in one thing, and then type it, repeat it. And then it's asking me for my admin password. I'm just going to repeat it. A lot of typing of passwords here. And my cut and paste doesn't really work too well in my environment. Like I said, I'm in a nested environment, but I'm also using RDP. So my audit user, again, just typing in the passwords for my audit user. Now it's asking, do you want to change the admin ID and the audit ID, the defaults? If you leave it, the default's admin and audit. I'm leaving it. Optional parameters says for internal use. Talks about for the password here. I'm just going to duplicate the password. Generally, these internal use ones I leave alone. Now it's asking me my host name, so I'm going to type in site A-NSX-MGR. Site A-NSX-MGR-01.vclass.local. It's asking me the role. This is an NSX Manager. These other roles, one is like if you're deploying in the cloud or not. The other one is a global manager. If you're playing with a thing called federation, where you got multiple independent NSX environments managed by a top NSX manager, that would be like the global manager. We're not doing that. I'm leaving it here. My IP address now for my manager, 172.20.10.41, and my management subnet mask. Oh, again, yours is going to be different. My default gateway to the 20.10.10 and IP6. I'm not using it. I'll leave those blank. DNS server list 172.20.10.10. I just got the one. The domain search list, I'm just going to say vclass.local. And NTP server or servers, I only got the one. So I'm just typing that in. I'm going to enable SSH. You're going to have to see what the policy is in your environment, if that's a good or bad idea. I'm going to enable root access to log in through SSH. Again, depending on your environment, you may or may not be allowed to do these. The software integrity checker says required only for NDC PP version 2.2. I'm just going to leave this off. Now it talks about some other parameters here. Generally, just leave all this stuff blank, but it's asking me for the password here, so I'm going to type that in. I've seen it before. It would fail to install unless I put in the password. I'm just going to duplicate that. That should be all the other stuff. I'm leaving it alone. I'll click next. There we go. That's it. Now it's saying what vCenter server are you associating it with. I found mine, so great. I'm just going to associate it with that one. And again, it says it's ready to complete, and I hit finish. And after that, you'll see it's actually installing. There we go. Now I'm in a nested environment. This is going to take a while to install, so I'll probably just I'll fast forward this as it's going through. Okay, so I'm just gonna I'll come back probably in 10 minutes, 50. Actually, it's going to install it, boot up, so I'll probably come back in about 15, 20 minutes. So your environment may vary on time, okay? See you back in a bit. So as we can see, it's finished installing. It says the plugin's been deployed, and we can click here. We can click here on the Start NSX onboarding. At this point, I could actually just click on this icon, which I'm going to do, or I could actually go directly to the NSX manager. So you see some plugins that have been deployed here. These are for the vSphere client, okay? And it's all done. So I'm going to click on the Install NSX onboarding. I clicked on the start the NSX onboarding. The first thing it's going to ask me about is the license key. Let me paste this in. I'm going to have to blur this out for you folks. So I'm going to add the license key. Okay, it was successfully added. It's going to ask you to read through the license agreement. Make sure you read all that stuff very carefully, and you take it from there. Now, this is where you get a choice on what you want to do. Do I want to use NSX for security only? That means I don't want to do any overlay networks. I don't want to do any gateways. I don't want to do any distributed routing, any of that stuff. VPN stuff, I don't want to do any of that, okay? This is for, I just want to do distributed firewall, microsegmentation only. Virtual networking allows you to do everything, okay? And it gives you examples on when to use this, right? So preparing cluster, enable security, no virtual networking is required, okay? And that's kind of the whole part of this demo. Or this one here, again, this is where you want to do everything as well. So I'm just going to say I want to do security only. So I'll say get started. And at that point here, it's asking me what cluster I want to set it up for. Let's ignore my edge cluster again. Let's just pretend it doesn't exist. It's from a previous lab. So I'm just going to pick my Site A cluster. It's going to say install NSX. And now at this point, it says you're about to configure distributed security on a selected cluster. Security features will be available only on the vSphere distributed switch with version 6.6 or higher. So you got to make sure these security features, first of all, that cluster has to have a vSphere distributed switch, and it's got to be 6.6 or higher. And then when you click on install, pause. So I selected my Site A Cluster 1. I'm going to say install NSX. And again, it gives me the warning here. Make sure you got that vSphere distributed switch. So I'm going to click on install. So right now what it's doing, if you've watched some of my other videos, it's actually preparing the host as transport nodes. Okay. Now all of this I could have done using the NSX Manager's native interface. But if I'm not that familiar with NSX, again, this is another way to do this through the vSphere client. So again, depending on your background, what your comfort level is, personally, I'm more of the NSX side of things, so I would be more comfortable. But anyways, this again shows me it's going through and it's preparing these hosts. So it's basically the same thing as preparing a transport node. The only difference here is, if you've watched my videos on preparing NSX transport nodes, the only difference here is these are not going to have any TAPs, VTAPs, right? Virtual tunnel endpoints. It's not going to have any of these TAPs set up to do encapsulation. Why? Because we're not doing any of that networking stuff. We're not doing overlay networks, that sort of thing, okay? So that we don't have Geneve, so we don't need TAPs. We're not doing encapsulation or any of that stuff, so there's no TAPs here. But I could have easily done it through the NSX Manager interface. So we'll let this run for a while. It'll probably take a little while, my lab environment, for it to do. So I'll just let it run. I'll probably speed this process up. Let me get my camera here. Okay, so we can see that the three hosts are prepared. It's actually applying NSX switch configuration to host number 1 here, and it says it applied successfully, right? So I'm going to click on next. Actually, you know what? I think I'm just going to click on next. All right. Okay, once our ESXi hosts have been prepared, in other words, they're now actually transport nodes. The next screen we're on here is security. Talks about creating firewall rules. This just talks about how NSX can simplify your solution, right? Now, one of the things it's going to show you is you can follow these 3 steps to allow you to create workload groups and apply security rules based on industry best practices and stuff. So when you look at here, you've got 3 steps here. Create infrastructure groups. Infrastructure groups would be stuff like, your DNS servers, NTP, Active Directory, that sort of stuff. And then when you go down, you can create environmental groups, and you can create application groups as well. So this is where you get into creating, with this little wizard here within the vSphere client, creating some rules. I can't see you sitting here and creating all your rules, because once this is done, then you go back to the old way of managing rules like you would do in NSX. I wouldn't say it's the old way, but you do it I'll call it the NSX way. I'm just going to cancel this. This is kind of a little wizard. I'm going to say, no, okay, I'll create my rules later, and I'm going to cancel that. It says, are you sure you want to cancel workflow and navigate to the NSX homepage? I'm going to say yes. So now at that point, it's canceled that. Now, what did it do in my environment? Okay. Let's go into, first of all, let's take a look at what it actually has done. So if I go into system here, come on. If I go into fabric, this comes down to you knowing NSX now, right? This is the NSX interface. But the cool thing is the plugin for vSphere, which I'll show you in a second. If I go to hosts under fabrics, you'll see there's my cluster 1. Notice the icon says security only. It doesn't say networking and security, just security, right? You see it created this ESXi profile for me. So kind of, again, if you're familiar with NSX, it created these transport node profiles for me. If I click on transport node profile, it created one automatically for me. So that wizard did all that. If I go into transport zones, NSX has 2 default transport zones. We see them there. Those are still there, or they didn't touch them. But notice this one here, NSX VLAN type transport zone. It's got this big long UUID on it, and it created that. And it shows me the transport node members here, right? And if I can click on there, it shows me my hosts over here, right? Might be a bug there, it says 6, but anyways, I got 3 of them here. Anyhow, but I'm in a nested environment. So it did all this stuff underneath the covers for me, right? More importantly, let's take a look at networking now, and I'm going to go into segments. You'll see that I have no NSX segments, so there's no NSX segments there. Kind of makes sense. But if I go into distributed port groups here, I click on this, you'll actually see that there's a bunch of port groups that are already created for me. You'll see VDSO1, PG app, VDSO1, PG database, VGSO1, PG management, vMotion, vSAN, and web. So what did it do? It actually took a copy, it took a copy of the port groups that are on the vSphere distributed switch, and it created, I'm going to call them NSX hidden, not really hidden, but NSX backed segments here, right? So we actually see this. It actually made a copy of this. If I look at like this web one here, see ports, there's one port being used, and I'll show you after. There's the port there. Let me close this. Let me go back into my host and clusters view, and there's my web VM, and you'll see that's connected to port group web. Okay, and again, you can almost think of it as a symbolic link. So it kind of made a VLAN back segment in the background and pointed this port group web to it. Now, the $1 million question here is, there's my port groups I had created. These are my app database, web, vMotion, all that kind of stuff that was created prior to all this. So I just made a copy of these. I wonder if I created a new port group now, what would it do with that? So I'm just going to right click on my distributed switch. I'm going to go to a distributed port group, new distributed port group, and I'll call this, I don't know, port group dash production. Okay. And I'm going to say next. I'm going to give it a VLAN of whatever, 60. I'm just pulling numbers off the top of my head. I'll go next, and I'll go finished. And then I wait, okay? So I just created that port group here. So here we see it, PG production. Let's go into NSX. Another thing I want to point out here, in the vSphere client, when I click on this, since I installed it this way, you'll see there's a plugin, an NSX plugin. So I can now just jump right into NSX from within the vSphere client. So that's kind of a neat way of doing this, right? Let's go back into networking here. Let's go to segments. Let's go back to distributed port groups. And do I see that one I created? There we go. It was right there. Port group production. And yeah. Yeah, so we see that over there. It's created for me, which is kind of cool. I can now go in here. I'm not going to demo creating firewall rules. I've already done that in a previous videos. Link to those videos are in the comments. So, but I can now go into, if I want to go into security, or actually, sorry, go into inventory. I can create my groups now. Let me just add a group here real fast. Web servers. I'm going to set my compute members. I'm going to do it dynamic. Again, for a full explanation of all this, watch that video, virtual machine. I'll say virtual machine name contains web in it. I'll apply it, save it. And I'm now creating an NSX group called web servers. I can say view members, and there should be one there at least. There it is. There's that web VM, which is on a distributed port group. And now I can now go into security if I want to. Security. Let's go into distributed firewall. And again, I'm going through this really fast because I've already demoed it in previous videos. So I'll say policy 1. And then I'll create a new policy here. Sorry, a new rule within that policy. Add rule. I'll call it, I don't know, web servers. It's my rule. I can say any source, any destination. I'll say any source. And I'll pick my, come on, where's my web servers group? I'll say any source, any source. Destination is my web server group, which we know is web 1. Services, I could type in here maybe add a service. Oh no, I don't want to add a service. Cancel that. Say I want to do a search for this. HTTP. Hit enter, and I'll say HTTP. I'll select this here and say okay. I could actually select multiple. So I'll say I'll leave that. I talk about that in the other one. I'll say I'll allow that, and then I would create maybe a default rule at the end to delete to deny everything, and I would publish it. Again, that's a really quick explanation of it. But bottom line is now I didn't have to go in and move all my VMs around to NSX backed segments. They're exactly where they were. I don't have to worry about it. My vSphere administrator can still manage things like they do normally, but they can now go in and manage these firewall rules within NSX, and it's a plugin right in the vSphere client. For those of you who are quite familiar with NSX, you could have actually, let me see if it'll show us in here. Yes, I want to navigate away. You could have actually installed NSX like you would normally, and then go into Quick Start, and then prepare a cluster. Is it going to come up? And then you would say, I want to select this cluster, let's say, and then install NSX, and say security only. It's grayed out here, but anyways, I can say network and security or security only. So there's two ways we could actually do this. Again, the first method, the one I just demoed through this whole YouTube video, was again for a vSphere administrator not that familiar with NSX. They can actually go through it. Now, for those of you that are vSphere administrators and not that familiar with NSX, you want to deploy a 3-node NSX. Watch my videos on that as well, okay? You want to set up a 3-node NSX management cluster. So, but that's basically about it. So there's a couple of ways we can do this. Let's see. Oh, one more thing. Again, if you stuck around so long, hit that subscribe button. Let's take a quick look at something here. Let's go back into here. How do I know these rules are on there? Let's look at, there's a web VM. Sorry, the app VM, right? So I got app VM here, and it's on, what host is it on? It's on host 3, ESXi03. Let's go into there. And I demoed this also in my distributed firewall videos. Again, if you haven't watched that, you definitely want to take a look at that. So NSX03, oh, that's the wrong one. Let's go back into, yes, I want to close that window. We want to go into ESXi03. So I'm on my host, where my app VM is running. I'm going to type in this command, summarize DV filter, and these are all the different filters here. Where's my app VM? Right down here at the bottom is my app VM, and you'll notice right off the bat, there's a, here is the distributed firewall filter, the SFW.2, stateful firewall.2 filter. That's the filter on the VMs. So I'm showing you the VMs on a regular port group, but it's got an NSX firewall rule on it, which is good. If I type in vsip ioctl, get rules -after filter, paste in that filter, and you'll see there is basically the rules for that app VM here. Okay, it's got the default rules and stuff. I demoed all this stuff also in the distributed firewall Part 2 series. All right, so again, if you haven't watched those, you want to check it out. So this is kind of cool. You vSphere administrators don't have to rip up everything and move everything over to NSX segments. Everything's done for you automatically in the background. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, again, smash that thumbs up, or if you found it at least a bit entertaining, hit that thumbs up. And last but not least, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. Without subscribers, there are no channels. It helps, you know, it will do me a great favor. Also, if there's something that you would like to see or do or whatever, make a comment. Put a comment in the, in there in YouTube. I answer all my comments. I go through them every day and I answer them, maybe a day or two out, but generally I answer all my comments. If there's something you'd like to see or me to show, I'll do my best. I can't guarantee everything. I'm limited on resources, but I'll see what I can do. Thanks again. Have a great day. See you in the next one. Bye.